This is a typical Soviet apartment. To get a home like this, many citizens had to wait in a state housing queue for up to 20 years. But once you finally moved in, you were effectively trapped. In the Soviet Union, your apartment became your identity, and changing it was almost illegal. This system left thousands of divorced couples stuck together in the same small rooms for years. To escape, people had to turn the housing market into a high-stakes game. They used underground brokers, bribes, and even fake marriages just to trade a flat with a stranger. But why did the government make it so impossible to move? And how did millions of people learn to hack a system designed to keep them in place? This is a story of how Soviet Union used housing to control its citizens. This is Sergey. He is 25 years old and wants to move out of his parents' flat. However, he cannot simply pick where he wants to live.
Under communism, virtually everything belongs to the state. The individual has little right to own property. He's told where to work with his employer.
This is the 1970s, and in the Soviet Union, there is no such thing as a real estate market. Virtually every building is owned by the state. To get an apartment, he must sign up for a waiting list. Once it's his turn, he will receive a stamp in his passport called Propiska. The Propiska was much more than just an address. It was a tool used to record and restrict every move a citizen makes. Showing it was mandatory to get a job, go to school, or even get married. The government created this system to stop the overflow of people from the countryside into the cities. In theory, you could move to a big city like Moscow, but in practice it was very rare. Getting into Moscow was a matter of extreme prestige. The rules were designed to keep people out. Even if someone had a family in the city, the authorities enforced a sanitary norm. Each person needed at least 12 square meters of living space. If adding additional residents to a flat made it too crowded, the request was denied instantly. Since most people lived in tiny rooms, this rule effectively locked the city gates. If Sergei was desperate, he could try to become a migrant worker. This meant taking the low-wage, dirty jobs that city natives refused to do. He would spend his days sweeping streets or cleaning sewers. After years of service, he might earn a permanent home in Moscow, but it was never guaranteed. Sergei doesn't want to risk waiting decades for a maybe, so he chooses the most common path. He applies for an apartment in his small hometown. But even here, there is no choice. When his name finally reaches to the top of the list, he is offered whatever flat is available. Even if he starts a family while waiting for a home, he might still receive a one-bedroom apartment. He can say no, but that means going to the back of the line for at least another 6 years. Like most people, Sergei will take whatever he's given. Soviet housing changed through the decades, and the apartment quality depended on who was in power. After the 1917 revolution, communal apartments were the default option. This type of housing was created to redistribute space from the wealthy to the working class. It allowed many people to move from the countryside to the city, but at a cost. These apartments housed whole families in isolated rooms while forcing everyone to share kitchens and toilets. In the 1930s, the Soviet Union began developing a new type of housing called skylines. These were ground buildings with high ceilings and thick walls. It was a way for Stalin to show off Soviet strength. But because they were expensive to build, they were mostly reserved for the elite. And most people still had to live in a communal housing. The true revolution came with Nikita Khrushchev in the 1950s. He introduced Brezhnevkas as a quick solution to the housing crisis. These were 5-story concrete blocks designed to give families their own private space. To save money, they were built without elevators, and the apartments were tiny, ranging from only 30 to 55 square meters. Even the largest ones had only 3 rooms, which was extremely cramped for larger families. After Khrushchev came Leonid Brezhnev. He introduced an upgraded version of the commie block called Brezhnevka. These are massive, high-rise blocks that define the skyline of former Soviet cities today. They are often 9 to 17 stories tall. They offer improved living standards with larger kitchens, higher ceilings, and modern amenities like trash chutes. The largest units reached about 76 square meters, a luxury compared to what came before. If Sergei is lucky, after his years of waiting, he will receive a flat in one of these high-rises. A massive upgrade from living with his entire family in a cramped Khrushchevka. But while ordinary workers waited in line, the Soviet elite, known as nomenklatura, lived by different rules. They used blood, a system of informal connections and favors. This allowed them to get better apartments without waiting. The privileged also received a second home, the dacha. A dacha was a seasonal home outside the city used as a retreat and a source of food from its garden. While ordinary citizens could sometimes get a dacha, theirs were much more cheap. Most were just summer houses without heating or running water. Those inequalities were exactly why the Soviet Union established such strict housing restrictions in the first place. With limited resources, it was easier for the government to keep workers where they were. The system allowed to keep a close eye on the population while ensuring the elites remain loyal and content. However, there were still ways to bypass the system. One common trick was the fake marriage, where someone would marry a stranger just to register their name at a specific address. Once they had residency, they would divorce and move out. The person would then receive a secret cash payment for selling the spot. But the most bizarre way to change your life was through the apartment swap. Since buying property was illegal, citizens used underground brokers known as maklers. These brokers organized elaborate exchanges between strangers. Finding a direct match was rare, so they organized chains involving up to 20 families. Potential swappers would meet at designated spots, holding up handmade signs advertising their rooms. But hiring a makler was a big risk. Their services could cost up to 800 rubles, which was nearly half a year's salary for a typical worker. But this cost was well justified. If a broker was caught by the authorities, they faced up to 3 years in prison. The government would also confiscate everything they owned. Despite these risks, the black market flourished. For many, it was the only way to escape a housing system designed to keep them trapped for life. When the Soviet Union fell, the system changed overnight. The millions of people living in these flats suddenly became the owners of the properties. Today, these cramped rooms are no longer tools of government surveillance. but they remain a physical reminder of a time when your home was not a choice. Thank you for watching. If you want to see more stories like this, consider subscribing to the channel.